everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kate Park. I'm a freelance reporter with TechCrunch. I'm pleased to moderate this session to discuss the topic Web3 adoption in Southeast Asia. We'll talk about the opportunities and challenges and more in Southeast Asia's Web3 market. Welcome our panelists. Clara Bo from Faction and Yu Hong from BCG.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Could you both please introduce yourselves to the audience?
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm Clara. I'm from Lightspeed Faction. We are a Lightspeed affiliated crypto fund focusing on blockchain and crypto investments in the early stage. So the Series A is our sweet spot, and our fund size is at 285 million. Our main focus is on backing and investing into founders and projects that look to spearhead innovative use cases utilizing blockchain technologies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yu Hong. I'm actually a partner at BCG. So we are actually a leading worldwide management consulting firm, and I actually specialize in Web3 and digital assets. So advising leading Web3 company, but also very traditional players on how to basically unlock the potential of blockchain. So very happy to be here to discuss.
All right, thank you both. Yeah, so Southeast Asia is a very diverse market and is emerging as a global frontrunner, global leader in Web3 adoption. So, Clara, I'd like to start with you. What has changed in the last 2 to 3 years in Web3, the Web3 scene in this region in Southeast Asia? Are there any interesting trends or catalysts in terms of companies or use cases for blockchain technologies or Web3 technologies?
Yeah, I think in the last 2 to 3 years, there was so much that have happened, not just in Southeast Asia, but on a global scale as well. So we have seen large institutions, large projects, lenders, exchanges that have built substantial value and ended up collapsing. And I would actually term the last kind of 12 to 18 months as kind of the great reset, whereby we had a very rude awakening whereby we saw the promise of Web3 technologies, what kind of value it could bring, but at the same time had a rude awakening that from an infrastructure, compliance, regulatory, as well as from a security standpoint, we were just not ready as an industry. So I think from a regulatory point of view, we have seen the purging of bad actors within the last 12 to 18 months. We have seen more positive rulings when it comes to the ETFs, which we believe will inspire more institutional inflows into the crypto space. And I think on the innovation side of things, in terms of founders, in terms of builders that are driving innovation, we have also seen the number of active developers actually decreasing within the last couple of years too, as value kind of like decreased alongside crypto prices. But I think that aside, like putting aside kind of the noise in terms of that comes with prices, like we actually see the number of long-term developers, long-term core developers that are actually driving core innovation steadily increasing, and that leads us to becoming more optimistic about the development of Web3 technologies, both in Southeast Asia as well as in the region. And I think on the user front, what's interesting is that during kind of the peak bull cycle, we saw substantial adoption of like DeFi as well as gaming in Southeast Asia in particular, and that brings us to the belief that there is huge amount of promise, but the key infrastructure needs to be fixed. And I think that's going to be a huge catalyst for projects that are working on core infrastructure, whether or not it's dealing with scalability of blockchains, whether or not it comes to accessibility, such as wallet infrastructure, on-off ramps, exchanges, settlement layers, payment rails. I think these are going to be some of the key themes to look out for as we kind of think about where the next phase of innovation is going to be at in Southeast Asia in particular, given the demographics and the intricacies of the region.
Thank you. Yu Hong, what opportunities do you see in Southeast Asia for adopting Web3? And where do you see that adoption taking place? And which countries are key players in adopting Web3 in Southeast Asia?
Thank you. I think that's a very good question. And when I think about it, right, so first of all, I think Southeast Asia is probably one of the regions with the highest adoption, right? If you look at, for instance, credit card penetration across all Southeast Asian countries versus wallet penetration for stablecoin, you will be surprised to see that you have higher wallet penetration than credit card penetration in all countries. And maybe like in some of the country, you may argue that actually wallet penetration increase and is higher than the banking penetration, right? So what does it really mean? It means that at some point, usage is picking up. I think that's basically the first point. The second point, if you look at transaction volume, you would see that on one of the major stable coin, right? Transaction, not by region, but globally, especially in the emerging market, are higher actually than the card transactions. So actually that's quite impressive, right? So people are using it on daily basis, right? And that also means that essentially that basically increase the penetration and the adoption of the most basic use case, which is tokenized money. It's easier to open a wallet than a bank account in most of those countries, right? Now, going forward, what will happen? All I believe is there are two, maybe three unlocks that need to happen, right? One is the convergence and the usage of that technology by large financial institutions, right? This is where a lot of those initiatives were saying, I think, Clara, you mentioned some of the institutions in the space adopting, right? I also know, for instance, in Thailand, right, SEABW is also very active in exploring that technology. I think that's basically is the number one, I think, priority, right? Second thing I would say is, in terms of technology infrastructure, there is 2 points which is important, right? One is identity, because in order to increase financial inclusion, right, the biggest way to do that is access to financial service. And the number one service that people are looking for is to loans, right? And uncollateralized loans. And without identity, it's very hard to issue uncollateralized loans. So identity will be key. The second thing, which is very key, is collateralization of real-world assets. Why? It's because if you don't have identity, how can you guarantee your loans? You need to guarantee your loans with real-world assets, right? And what kind of real-world asset does the underbank have? Could be like, token of, crops, agricultural product. So we've seen projects of tokenizing, lands, crops. Those are the day-to-day items that people need and need actually working capital to get loan out of that. So we see actually those two as key infrastructure to unlock the next wave. But overall, we're very, very excited to see the adoption in the region. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so in Southeast Asia, more than 50 to 70% of adults are still unbanked or underbanked. So which means they are struggling with access to digital financial assets, digital financial services. So do you think cryptocurrencies or crypto assets can address this issue and help unbanked populations in Southeast Asia with cryptocurrency? And can it be a catalyst for financial inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think essentially the infrastructural constraints within Southeast Asia is going to be the biggest driver of Web3 within this region. And that's because innovation is going to be born out of necessity, not a nice to have. And currently, as you mentioned, 50-70% of the population is unbanked. And if we contrast this to internet penetration rates in the region, it's 80 to 90% the last time I checked. So this actually provides an optimal breeding ground within the region for Web3 technologies to thrive, because you have the ideal demographics. You have young, large populations, technologically savvy people that are ready to onboard onto Web3 technologies in order to tap on the different products. And I think when it comes to financial means, there is a huge portion of people that lack the ability to access core financial products simply because they are unbanked or underbanked. being able to form an identity, like what Yu Hong has mentioned, in order to access credit, in order to access basic yield, like on the savings perspective, being able to generate more capital efficiency on their funds is something that's going to be a huge unlock for a lot of people within the region. And I think like the next natural question would be, aren't Web2 companies already solving these? We have like, fintech platforms, lending platforms, credit, buy now, pay later platforms, investment savings platforms. Like they are all seeking to solve this. And I think that has paved like a very nice route for people within the region to tap on financial products generally, even despite being underbanked. But I think one kind of drawback of Web2 platforms is that they lack the element of composability, and essentially that brings the leverage that allows the leverage to lie within these Web2 platforms, because they can choose to upsell whichever products. It essentially limits the scope of products that a user can have access to once they onboard onto this Web2 platform. And the promise of Web3 is that it allows composability, whereby the leverage now is transferred over to the user. User has a variety of options to choose from, whether it comes to lending to like this platform or that platform, depending on the risk return profile, depending on the yield, depending on the rates that are being offered, whether or not it comes to being able to tap on certain other yield opportunities. In this sense, like users start having a variety of options, and I think that is going to inspire more competition within the financial landscape, and in that sense, create further innovation as well.
Thank you. Yuhong, do you have anything to add? Or
No, I think that's very much correct. And I think one last thing I want to add is, when you really think about the underbanked people, right, and the reason why traditional financial institutions have not been able to address them, it's all about user experience, right? We're talking about people that really don't want to understand what is gas fee, right? They don't want to wait for things to work, right? They want to have something which is very, very easy to use, right? And they have no technical knowledge whatsoever. And then they can just exchange and perform the basic function on the day-to-day basis. And I think that used to be very, very hard a few years back, right? But now I think most of the technology, both in terms of transfer speed, time to finality, and also user experience, i.e., like can sponsor from gas, can allow you to unlock that. So I think that's the last point I want to supplement, right? User experience is also a big unlock.
all right, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic. I'd like to talk about the challenges. And Southeast Asia is a diverse region with 11 countries, different languages, different culture, political systems, economic structures, like regulations and so forth. So what are the challenges Southeast Asia face in Web3 adoption?
Yeah, like there are quite a number of challenges. And I think the first and foremost one is that Southeast Asia is a very diverse region. So when it comes to, it is made up of like many different countries. There are 6 main ones that people term the ASEAN 6. And from a regulatory perspective, all countries have their own set of regulations. They all have their different perspectives on how to tackle the Web3 market. So in that sense, when it comes to cross-border expansion, founders and teams would have to navigate many intricacies in order to get there. And I think the second piece is that not only from a regulatory perspective is different, like culturally, language-wise, the way businesses are being conducted is also super different. And that then falls on founder quality, whether or not we have enough talent within the region to be able to navigate this, whether or not we have people who understand really how the workings of each country's business works. I think that is another challenge, given that there is also Southeast Asia in general, like we compete from a talent perspective, we have to compete with global players who might entice talent to flow over, or we also compete with big tech companies who have chosen to set up Asian headquarters in Southeast Asia, and there might be the allure of working for a big tech as opposed to like starting your own startups. But I think that is changing. We have started seeing these trends changing. We have seen like founders, we have seen like experienced operators coming back to Southeast Asia in order to tap on the Southeast Asian opportunity. We have seen tech operators within like centralized entities that have seen problems with centralized systems and wanting to solve this by starting their own decentralized platforms or projects. So I think that on that path, I'm slightly more optimistic. And the last point I will make in terms of challenge, in terms of adoption, is on education, as well as I think the point that Yuho made on user experience as well. I think currently the user experience within crypto is super fragmented, and a lack of education would then further impede further adoption on the user level. So there are a ton of projects working on this to solve this, whether or not it comes to account abstraction, gas abstraction, whether it comes to working with Web2 companies in order to smooth over the adoption of cryptocurrencies. But that is definitely going to be one of the near-term challenges for when it comes to adoption in this region.
Okay, thank you, Clara. How about you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Clara. I think what I would like to add is, on the first point, on the regulation part, I think it's fragmented, but we're seeing progress across the region, right? And I think the expectation is that in the next 18 to 24 months, at least we'll have a clarity on the roadmap on where each country would stand, right? Doesn't mean that, it's positive or negative, but the biggest driver in the industry is clarity, right? If it's no, then it's a clear no, right? If it's yes, then it's a clear yes, right? I think that's very important. And the reason why it's important is because as soon as you have regulatory clarity, then you have licensed players trying to adopt it at the massive scale. Licensed players are not going to move before regulatory clarity, right? So the question would be, who are actually going to basically make the baby steps and capture and do all the pre-move so they can win as soon as regulatory comes, right? That's going to be a land grab games. And the reason I think about it is essentially, if you really think about the landscape, right, either in Web2 or in financial services, right, it changes very, very slowly, right? It changes only like every 10 years. And it's driven typically by two things, either financial crisis, right, or tech disruptions, right? And I think we're like in the cycle where tech disruptions, powered by regulatory clarity, is going to be one of them.
Great, thank you, Yuhong. In terms of regulations, digital assets and cryptocurrency are still fairly new, and we are still experiencing the growth with them. So, but some governments like Japan have adopted a progressive stance on cryptocurrency. What about Southeast Asia countries? Are they?
I think most of the Southeast Asian countries are progressing very well in that side, right? And I think Singapore is on the forefront of that, right? And I think the key reason is nobody wants to be left behind, right? So it's what I call, I would say, institutional FOMO, right? Everyone wants to be there, right? But you have to think about what the regulation is trying to do, right? The regulation are not actually trying to protect people like you and me or in the audience, right? Regulations are trying to protect people such as my mom, right? Your grandparents, etc., right? People which are much more vulnerable, but also, I would say, less financial proficient, right? And if there is no guardrail about that, I can totally imagine that, my grandmother will actually have some pitfalls. So essentially, like how do you balance the adoption of technology and the protection of people like my grandmother, right? That would actually be the key to that region. So definitely it's going to the right direction, and it's likely going to start with, institutions and high net worth individuals which are like less at risk of that before moving to the mass retail.
Okay, thank you. Let's jump to the next topic, cryptocurrency investment trends. I'm curious from both of your perspectives. You're an investor and you're a consultant. So how do you assess the long-term vision and scalability of a startup in the Web3 and crypto space, given their inherent volatility and regulatory uncertainties? How do you assess them?
Yeah, I think for us, we index very heavily on two things. So one is fundamentals, the other is team. So in terms of fundamentals, it's stuff like, the problem space, how large is it? If it's an equity-based company, we zero in on like the economics, whether or not that makes sense. we look at product market fit, we look at competitive landscape. So fundamentals are very important, and I think fundamentals will prevail beyond narrative in the long term. So that's definitely something that we zero in very heavily on. And the other aspect that we also index heavily on is on team. So given, as you mentioned, like it's volatile, like it's ever changing, you want to invest in a team that has a long-term vision and have sufficient conviction and grit to be able to see the vision out, but at the same time still nimble enough to be able to pivot given the ever-changing landscape. So I think like team-wise, we have to be uncompromising if we are thinking about it from a long-term perspective. And the last point I will point out on team is also on intellectual honesty. So given that the regulations is still kind of in flux at this moment, it can be tempting to take a less honest route just to get to the end goal quicker. But I think in the long run, like it is important to invest in founders with very strong intellectual honesty in order to ensure that that there's just long-term sustainability of both the business as well as the team.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to complement is, I want to emphasize fundamental is very, very important. Totally agree on that. And also, like, essentially, what's the revenue model that you're making, right? Because, I mean, most of the case, beside the tech innovation, right, there is actually a business model innovation. And obviously, that gets very messy if you talk about, like, how it's distributed to the community, and there is airdrop, and there is points, etc., right? But fundamentally, right, you need to be able to explain it of what this token or value is actually accrued to or spent to, right? Is it something which is, an interest rate that you're paying in order to borrow more capital, or is it actually a customer cost of acquisition? But also on the revenue side, right? Are you trying to get something which is, a fee, a tolling fee for using your infrastructure, or are you trying to get something which is, like a pool that will be redistributed later and to the token holders, right? So really understanding how the value accrues in the system and who are you taking money from, right? That's actually quite important, right? Because if you're taking money from no one, likelihood that the market doesn't exist is also very high, right? So who are you basically eating the pie into, right? That's actually very important. And if it's a real wide space, then the question is it really real, or is it something that is your imagination, right? I think those are the things that you should keep in mind. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. This is our last question. How do you envision the future of Web3 space in Southeast Asia over the next 5 to 10 years? You want to go first? You?
Yeah, I think like 5 to 10 years, I'm actually very, very excited about the Southeast Asia as a region, right? I think it's one of the first region where you will probably reach a few 100 million users, right? Just because of the overall penetration and the curve for the moment. I think that's one, right? Second, I think this is also a very young region, right? So essentially, you see also like, the over-indexing of that because young people adopt the technology more and are happy to actually experiment more, right? And third, I also see a lot of talent emerging across the region, right? Interested to move into the topic. Both startups, but also moving from traditional tech company to crypto ventures, right? So overall, quite excited about the outlook. And if we basically have a better ecosystem, both in terms of investors, regulators, and industry players, I'm actually very bullish on the future of the region.
Yeah, like I completely agree with Yu Hong here. I think what I see in the next 5 to 10 years, or what I'm hoping to see, is that no one really talks is that we will stop probably talking about Web3 as a whole new technological concept, just like how we don't talk about internet in general, and the underlying technologies, but we rather we focus more on the use cases. So I think we will be able to kind of abstract away a lot of the kind of deep technological pieces, because that would be solved, that would be abstracted away, and a lot more focus will be placed on use cases. So whether or not it's gaming, whether or not it's on a financial scale, whether or not it's on social, I think that we will see a lot of these being closely integrated in the everyday lives of people within Southeast Asia, just given, as Yu Hong mentioned, there is the perfect demographics to be able to drive adoption within the space. And I think in terms of what we can look forward to, it will be a a kind of like a synergistic nature between like Web2 and Web3. We have already seen Grab kind of allowing cryptocurrencies to be used to top up wallets. And I think we'll see more of these Web2, Web3 collaboration. And that will, again, drive more adoption into this region then.
Right. Thank you. All right. Clara, Yuhong, thank you so much. It was a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kate. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you all.